Let's unbox the Hot Wheels Starships Select Darth Vader's TIE Advanced. Varykino. If it's Star Wars, we collect it. Hello there, thanks for visiting Varykino. I've been working my way through my collection of Hot Wheels Starship Select vehicles, getting them out of their boxes and adding them to my display, and I'm down to my lucky last Darth Vader's TIE Advanced. This one came out quite a while ago. You can see it is number 6 in the line, so the second assortment a little while ago. This one has recently just been reissued in the most recent assortment that also contains that fantastic New Republic E-Wing, and while I wait for some of those new waves to hit here in New Zealand, I want to get all of mine on display ready for those new ones to finally join alongside. So this is my lucky last unboxing from the ones that I've had stored away until, of course, I get my hands on those new ones. I'm really excited. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today. Coming up really soon, I'll take a closer look at Darth Vader's TIE Advanced out of the box. We'll do a few comparisons to a couple of other vehicles as well. But first, let's take one last look at the packaging. The packaging style for the Hot Wheels Starship Select line has remained consistent from the very first release through to the most recent, which is fantastic if you do like to keep yours inside the packaging. On the front here, we have the black and white Star Wars logo at the top, and underneath the large window, we have the Hot Wheels Starships Select logo there, and the name for this ship, Darth Vader's TIE Advanced. We have a lovely big window here, which wraps around on both sides there, and we can see that the ship itself is packaged slightly tilted on an angle pointing up towards the right. On the top here, rather than having a window letting in more light, we have some interesting printed graphics. We have a blueprint style black and white image here of the TIE Advanced and the faction symbol, which of course is the Galactic Empire red cog symbol that we have here. On the top for the hangar here, we have the number for this particular vehicle, number 6, and Darth Vader's TIE Advanced written there on the underside. On the back, we have a nice image here of the ship on the included display stand, which we can see pictured here, which allows us to rotate the ship 360 degrees, and we can see some of the other ships in this particular assortment: Obi-Wan Kenobi's Jedi Interceptor, the Millennium Falcon, and the Imperial Shuttle. I think it's fantastic that Hot Wheels is reissuing Darth Vader's TIE Advanced for fans that were never able to find this way back when it was originally released, or perhaps more recent collectors that are just diving into collecting this particular line and didn't get it way back when. Something that I think is just fantastic for fans when you were really wanting to collect all the ships in the line. I am especially crossing my fingers for a reissue of the Imperial Shuttle. We never ever saw this one here locally for us personally here in New Zealand, and I'm sure there are many fans trying to get their hands on this. It does go for quite a premium on the secondary market, so fingers crossed this will perhaps be the next one that Hot Wheels decides to reissue. I really want for that one for my collection. I have the rest, and also this one does have a chase battle damaged version as well. The variants have a light blue marking here for the name of the ship, and of course you can obviously see the large battle damage marking on the ship in the window. That was another one that I was not able to find locally, so I just have this version here. I'm really excited. It's quite nostalgic, of course, with the TIE Advanced appearing all the way back in the original Star Wars film A New Hope, and it also appeared in the original vintage die-cast range of vehicles, which I think is really quite nostalgic. I have one on hand, and I'm really keen to see these side by side. So let's open this one up and check it out. So now I have the TIE Advanced out of the packaging. I also have the box containing the display stand out here as well. I'm just going to pop that off to the side. I just want to quickly show the backing insert card here. This was of course packaged inside the box behind the Starship. You can't really see this very well when it's inside the box because it's very dark, but we have this really fun blueprint style artwork here of all of the ships of this particular assortment. We can see the Imperial Shuttle, Millennium Falcon. It's really fun, and of course if a ship is ever reissued, this artwork in behind the ship will be different to reflect the ships from that particular assortment. So the reissue of the Darth Vader TIE Advanced will have a different insert artwork there, which I think is really fun. But of course, let's take a closer look at the ship itself. And I say this for many of the ships, but of course these are metal die cast. They are very heavy. And of course, Darth Vader's TIE Advanced is bulkier and sort of heavier than a standard TIE fighter. So it's really fun to hold hold in person. And looking over the ship, the first thing that I want to just check and see is, are there any plastic components? Because of course, while this is a predominantly die-cast metal line, anything that usually moves or is particularly long and pointed for safety reasons, because this is sold in the toy section, are generally made out of plastic. So like the laser cannons on X-Wings are generally a little bit more rubbery, or say any of the wings that move generally are plastic as well. But feeling this feels solid metal. The points at the front, the wings are full metal. This component here at the back behind the cockpit is fully metal. I think this is one of the full metal ships. The tiny exception, of course, is the small plastic insert for where we attach it to the stand. Of course, we want to have plastic on plastic for that maneuverability there. So that's just that one tiny little plastic piece there on the inside. I really like the fact that this is fully metal. There's always something so fun about the heft of these full metal die-cast vehicles. It just really feels nice in the hand. Of course, because it is fully metal, nothing moves, though I do notice when I'm holding this that there is just the tiniest little wiggle to this wing. Generally speaking, most of the vehicles that have fixed wings in this line are very well attached. This one feels very sturdy. This one, there is just the tiniest little wobble to it. So I have found that on one of my other TIE fighters, one of the wings just has a little bit of a wobble to it. So I am just going to be just a little bit careful just so I don't accidentally break something. So just one tiny little flaw to this. They're generally really secure, but yes, that's not an intended wiggle there. So we're going to look at the painted details. So starting at the top of the cockpit, of course, this top opening doesn't actually open. It's fully sculpted as one with the main body there. We've got this gloss black to sort of simulate that top window there. And of course, we've got that awesome TIE cockpit window there on the front, again painted in that gloss black, because there is no interior here, no little plastic figure inside. We've got little red accent points for the laser cannons here at the front. That looks quite fun. And then of course we've got this sort of very iconic sort of TIE fighter blue-gray color. Of course, everyone has their opinions about sort of the different accuracy levels. Of course, some people really like some of the nostalgic colors from the toys of the 70s and things like that, and on screen they're always very dark. I really like the sort of the slightly blue toned gray. I feel like that just sort of really hits a nostalgia for me because of some of the toys that I had. This sort of takes me back, and I really like just the overall wash and paint detail from the Hot Wheels Starship Select line. Some of the ships don't have any kind of weathering. The ones that do, I find them to be really well applied. So we can see, apart from the black wing panels, the rest of it has that iconic sort of TIE fighter blue-gray color with a wash over it, and the wash for the most part looks to be sort of a mid to dark gray, and we can see it here. We can see that sort of weathering around on the sort of outlying strips there. We can see that through the center. It's got a little bit more of a speckling effect, particularly around the front here, around the cockpit, and then moving on towards the back here. It has a little bit more of a wash where it's kind of coming in around sort of the crevices, less of a speckle. It definitely looks more like a wet sort of wash finish on those things. So it's kind of interesting that we've got the same color sort of weathering around these, but slightly different effects in the different places. But overall, it gives sort of a battle-worn effect to it, which is kind of fun. And I think it's going to match alongside the standard TIE fighters from the line quite nicely. I do have a standard TIE fighter from the Hot Wheels Starship Select line to do a little bit of a comparison alongside later on. And of course, just the fantastic paint job and weathering of this line really highlights all of the fantastic line and sculpting detail work from these toys. Really cool. I like that I can see all of those little detail parts, all of those lines. We can see that accent paint coming in around sort of the edges here, just kind of getting in the crevices where weathering would really hit there. Fantastic. And of course, we've got that iconic TIE fighter texture here on the wings. Though I have to say, this is one of the few examples I have with a little bit of a flaw. It looks like I have some scratches here or I don't know which way round this is painted. So I don't know if this is blue flecks of paint on a black body or where black paint has been scratched to show that color there. But I can see it's not fully black. We've got a little bit of a flaw here. And unfortunately, it's also on the same place on the side, so it kind of disappears a little bit with the weathering, and I can't even sort of see it from certain angles if I tip it to the side. But when I'm looking up close, I can see that it isn't fully uniform black where it should be, and that's just a little bit unfortunate. It's like somebody's held it like this during the painting stage or something like that, just when it was sort of a bit tacky, not fully dry, and that paint has just come off in those places. But this was a popular ship here in New Zealand. It was hard to find. Of course, it was in that same assortment with the Imperial Shuttle. Both of those vehicles were just popular and disappeared. So, and also just hard to spot with the way that they packaged them like this in the boxes. You can't see the sides of the wings very well. So perhaps I will pick one up from the new assortment. You can never have too many Hot Wheels Starship Select vehicles. I feel like I want to have a full display of as many from the line as I can possibly collect, and then just have a few scattered around the house in some of my favorite bookshelves and displays, just because they're so cool. It's always fun to have a complete line of toys in one spot, all dedicated. But then sometimes you like niche collecting. Maybe you focus in on TIE fighters and you want to build a TIE fighter display, so you could put, you know, another double of this in with some TIE fighter items. So I'm tempted to pick up another one. This is just really cool. I'm loving the detail. And of course, Darth Vader has just this really different shaped back part here to the cockpit of his TIE Advanced. It's so different. This huge sort of half circle crescent shape out the back makes it seem like just really aggressive. Very, very cool. So yes, a little bit of an unfortunate flaw to the paint and just that little bit of a wiggle there on the wing. But overall, again, I'm really a fan of the paintwork on these ones. It always goes like completely to the underside there. We can see the rivets used to attach the two pieces of metal. Actually, the weathering on the underside is a lot heavier on this one. That's kind of interesting. You can sort of see where it's been applied. A lot heavier on the underside. That's kind of interesting. Usually I find that this line is generally quite sort of symmetrical in the level of weathering on the top and bottoms of ships. That's quite interesting that that's so much more heavier. And we can see where we're going to attach it to the display stand. And yeah, because with these are sort of two parts riveted together, we do get a little bit of a seam line across the front. It's kind of got a little bit of a jigsaw puzzle connection point where it drops down. It's not a straight line all the way across. We kind of get this little cutout section, which I think does work pretty well with the design of the ship. It works with the features rather than sort of cutting through that sort of slightly notched section there in the sculpting. So I like that they've actually sort of tried to put the construction of the ship in play with the way that it is attached. And we've even got the weathering on the inside panels here. We can see that connection point there and the weathering all the way to the back. No sort of detail or anything different here on that back end. Just some fantastic paintwork. A little bit of a shame that I've just got those little scratches. But who knows, if I can find another one, then this one will probably go somewhere else in my Star Wars display, and we'll put a new one alongside my Hot Wheels Starship Select. So I mentioned earlier that I have the vintage die-cast Darth Vader's TIE Advanced for a little bit of a side-by-side comparison. So I'll just quickly grab that one. I'm going to be very careful with it because it is a vintage item. And if you are familiar with this one, and you may have one in your collection, you'll know that this one isn't actually fully die-cast. So we've got a clear plastic window on the front, and the wings are fully plastic. And if I can pick it up and show, we have that inaccuracy of the fact that it is actually a standard TIE fighter cockpit there. It doesn't have that crescent shape extending to the back like this one does. If I just stand this one on its edge, there, we can see that sort of big, large crescent shape. This one does not. This is the little plastic component that you can pull out to remove the Darth Vader figure on the inside. The wings on this one are just a little bit fragile. Of course, it was lovingly played with for many years in the 70s. I'm just going to be careful with it. But I thought it was really interesting that the full wings on this die-cast vehicle are plastic. On this modern one, they are fully metal, which I think is just really fun. And it's really neat to see these side by side. Looking at the proportions of them, the wings on this one are a lot bigger. They stand a lot taller and just overall feel a lot bigger than this one. But in saying that, the cockpit on this one feels smaller in comparison to the overall proportions. This one has that kind of hefty, chunky cockpit body that gives it just an overall sort of much bigger shape, which I think is really interesting. And I feel like, you know, we love our vintage toys, but they weren't always the most accurate. I feel like this one feels a lot more accurate in terms of the proportions. And of course, we've got that much more accurate back to the cockpit there. And actually, the cockpit just feels bulkier as well. Of course, we've got these much wider attachments, but maybe something around the top and the sort of the hatch at the top feels a lot thicker than as it is depicted on the vintage version. It was just so fun. If you sort of collected in the vintage era, just that sort of the way that we had the packaging and all of that kind of stuff. I've still got the backing card for this particular one. It was a Palatoy, and it was fun that, you know, they had some of the other vehicles in the line and the standard actual sort of Kenner action figures there. It's just really fun to see. And of course, if you collected the vintage era die-cast vehicles, then you'll probably be a big fan of this Hot Wheels select line there as well. Of course, a lot more expensive to collect them these days. You know, the cost of toys back then was a lot less than these days, but it's fun to see these side by side. I do treasure this one, but it is really fun to sort of add these newer, slightly more accurate versions to my display as well. So it's really fun to see those side by side. Now, I'm going to get this one on its display stand next so we can compare it alongside the standard TIE fighters from the same Hot Wheels Starship Select line. Tucked away in the underside of the packaging is a second little box here that contains the two components that we use to assemble to create the display stand. We can see that pictured here on the box. So let's open this one up and get the display stand assembled so we can get our TIE Advanced fully built. So let's pop that box aside. We can see that we have the main base plate there wrapped in tissue paper, which is to protect the printing. So each of the display stands from this line have the faction logo. We can see her TIE Advanced with the name there as well. So often, because the names can be quite long, we see them shrunk down. So instead of Darth Vader's TIE Advanced, we have simply TIE Advanced here, and that lovely silver Imperial cog there. Just fantastic. Along the front edge, we have two sort of pressed in logos there. We have the Star Wars logo and the Hot Wheels logo there. It's a little bit more cryptic because it is so small, but that is of course the Hot Wheels flame logo there. So I'm going to put the connecting pieces together. There's usually a nice satisfying click there. It's very sturdy. You can take it apart, but of course there's no reason to once you have that fully assembled, and we can see that ball-shaped attachment point that lets us rotate it around. This doesn't snap together. It's a little bit more of sort of a gentle push and a little bit of a wiggle. These are metal, so you can press firmly across there, get that on, and get that all attached. And once they're on, they are very secure. I've found that even the heaviest of ships, I can tip upside down and there's no risk of coming out. And even though these do lean forward, I find that the center of gravity is always well thought out. And as you can see, it's not tipping over. Even if I do that, I can get all the kind of cool opposing angles. And it does say on the side of the box that they can rotate 360 degrees, which you can see. So you can really pose this whichever way you want, and it stays on there. You can pose whichever way you want, which is just fantastic if you want to sort of pose for a bit of a dogfight, or perhaps you really want to see the top details of your ship there. You can really get that. Looks fantastic. And I like having the sort of the details on the underside there on that base. Looks really cool. Just fantastic. Of course, this one really wants to move around. I think just this is so heavy. Just making sure that that's really solidly on there. The TIE fighters with their tall and long wings, they do sort of hit on the support strap when you try to turn it around, because of course the TIE fighter, the TIE Advanced, has these sort of more shorter curled under wings. I can actually turn them all the way around if you want to get a little bit of a different pose there on your display stand. But I really like when you get all your ships together displayed, because they all have the same black base with silver logo, with the exception of the newly introduced prototype subline. They have a white plastic base, but other than that they look the same, because of course you don't have to collect those prototype ships if you don't want to, or you can have them displayed separately. I think it's fun that they are just a little bit different to the main line, but the black works so well for the ship line, but especially so for TIE fighters. I feel just that sort of dark Imperial gloss black, I think, works so well when you put TIE fighters on their stands. And because these ships don't have landing gear, they just look sort of more correct to be sort of in a sort of a simulated flight mode. You know, I like the curve of the stand. It kind of gives a forward momentum to the ships and raises them up, so you don't need sort of any sort of landing gear or anything like that. They kind of look like they're in flight. Especially true of ships that have sort of a different wing mode when in flight versus landed. They just look sort of, I think some of the Star Wars starships just look a little bit cooler when they're in flight, you know, like X-Wings with their wings fully open and that kind of thing. So I'm really keen to see this alongside the standard TIE fighter from the same line. So of course there are actually two versions of the TIE fighter. We have the original one, which was included in the very first wave, and we can see the coloring there does look pretty similar. We've got a bit of a different wash for this one though. This one was a lot more of a darker wash. This one was a little bit more of a gray. It just kind of gave it a little bit more of a weathered look. This one actually feels like a bit more of an antiquing highlighting wash. You can see the way that it really highlighted all of those lines and the way that it sort of really showed off all those details. Very different style weathering when I compare those two. Very different. I think this one, I think the weathering for this style works. It would be kind of interesting to see the Darth Vader TIE Advanced with the same weathering style as this one. I don't mind either of them. I think that they really work, but it's just kind of interesting that this one was, I think, if memory serves me right, I think this one was like number 2. It was definitely within the first 4, and this one was number 6 from the second wave there. So it's interesting that they sort of changed up the weathering styles. And of course, we also had a battle damaged TIE. So if I line these up, in a subsequent wave, we had the battle damaged TIE fighter there. We can see that sort of fiery marks there on the side. But between this release and this release, if I just pop this one out of the way, they changed the base height. So the base style has always stayed the same, but between these two releases, they heightened the support piece here so that you can see that the wings are a different height, and I'm not quite sure the reason. I do like the higher one. I think once you get them all together, this higher one looks better. So I was curious to see which height base this one has. I was curious to see if perhaps they would have given it the same base, that they had decided that that first release was a little bit short. We'll give them higher ones the next time we do it. So I thought because this one was so close to the original, it might have a short base there, but it is indeed taller than the first one, because I thought maybe the re-release of this would have the taller base if this one had the shorter one, but we can see it's actually a sort of a gradient scale. I like that. Because of course we have these shorter wings, I felt like maybe they wanted it up higher. Maybe if it was on a short base, it would look really short. Of course, we don't want Darth Vader's TIE fighter to kind of look, you know, sort of small and not as sort of imposing next to the standard ones. We're kind of getting a little bit of a Death Star trench run sort of attack squadron here, which looks kind of cool to see them all lined up. Of course, these are all 3 different ships. There's no double ups here. We have these from their first releases. The first TIE fighter here, this was the first release of the Darth Vader's TIE Advanced. And to be honest, the more I'm thinking about it, the more I do want to get my hands on the re-release to see if they did anything different on this one. For some of them, like the Mandalorian's N1, the releases and the subsequent re-release were really close together. But for some weird reason, they packaged the N1 facing 2 different ways. I don't know why they did that. I'm curious to see that the re-release of the TIE Advanced, they didn't mix it up. It is facing the same way in the re-release packaging. It just has that different assortment pictured on the back. But these look really fun all together. This one feels so much heavier. I feel like I have to sort of keep adjusting it because it doesn't fall on the knob, but I feel like it's much easier to kind of push it around just because the weight is moving that sort of heavy sort of cockpit section a little bit forward. I kind of want to adjust it. These ones, the center of gravity is sort of very on the inside. They don't sort of rotate quite as freely. Still very easily, but this one just sort of, it wants to, I can feel the sort of the pull of gravity, wants to sort of pull it forward there. But something about this extra detail here at the back, I do think it kind of looks cool posed down. When I've posed it facing forward, if this was on sort of an eye level shelf, I would miss out on all of this detail there at the back. So I like that you can just easily sort of pivot it around so you can see all of that extra detail. Fantastic for the ships that have a little bit more of a flat profile, so you can really see all of that extra detail. It just looks so different with this extra panel there in the back. You do kind of miss out if you're looking at it straight on from the front. Of course, you still get that really cool iconic sort of curved wing shape there. Really fun to see all 3 of these lined up. This one has the same weathering style as the TIE Fighter, so they do match quite well. I think it's kind of fun that Darth Vader's stands out a little bit more with a slightly different weathering style. Perhaps he doesn't see quite as much action in his TIE Fighter as a standard Imperial TIE pilot there. So he's got a little less weathering on his. We've just got this sort of light grey speckling sort of there on the front. Really fun to see these side by side. I love this line. I'm trying to collect up as many as I can. It's still sad that we have had whole waves just kind of miss out and for us here in New Zealand. Still trying to track those down, but I love that they do reissue ships like this one for fans that, like us, missed out first time perhaps, like that Imperial shuttle. Fingers crossed they reissue that one. I really want to build out my Imperial ships. They just look so cool. I love my Republic ships, my Rebellion ships. You know, that Mandalorian Gauntlet fighter is absolutely fantastic. I love that one, but there's just something about sort of seeing the Imperial sort of fleet here, getting them all together. They look really cool displayed all together. Really excited to get these 3 side by side finally. So now I have opened up all of my Hot Wheels Starship Select that I had in their boxes. I will hopefully very soon do a video showcasing my entire collection because I think they look just so cool out of their boxes and on display. So there you go. That was the Hot Wheels Starship Select Darth Vader's TIE Advanced. Quite a long name, but a very cool ship. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today as I opened up another Star Wars collectible, checked out all of the details, did a few comparisons and had a lot of fun. I hope you have a wonderful morning, afternoon or evening wherever you are in the galaxy, and let's hang out again very soon for more Star Wars fun. May the Force be with you. If you're a Hot Wheels Starship Select fan, I recently unboxed the TIE Interceptor vehicle. That video is linked here in case you haven't already seen it, as well as a whole Hot Wheels Starship Select playlist. This is the way.